Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Anthony here. So I'm going to show you guys how to create a simple lockdown command. So this one's a little bit tricky. It took me a little bit to figure out because the permissions are very, a little bit confusing. But there's actually two things that you have to take into consideration. If you have a server that has a general role that's given to everyone, you have to make sure you disable the permissions for that role for all of your channels that should be locked. Okay, so what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, whenever people join my server, they should be given the developer role. Okay, so sometimes disabling the at everyone permission, sometimes disabling the at everyone role for send messages might not be enough because you have the developer role overriding the permissions for the at everyone permission. So let me see if I can kind of like show you guys an example. So right now, if you look at my channels, we can see that at everyone for send messages it is disabled. Okay, but let's say, for example, developer, if I give this guy the developer role, he should be able to send messages to this channel, as you can see, because the role itself overrides those permissions because that role is above at everyone. So you have to take this into consideration. So you might need to lock both roles down for every single channel. So what I mean by that is we're going to take the at everyone role. So to get the ID of that, you just copy the ID of your guild. You need to lock true, and that's going to lock the entire channel for the at everyone though. So this will not affect everyone with the developer role. Okay, so people who have that developer role, you need to get the ID of that role and then lock the channel for that role. Okay, I want to make sure this is clear so people don't get, upset on why this doesn't work, because this is like 90% on how your permissions are set up. Okay, now you're probably wondering, why are these servers not being affected? Now you're probably wondering, why are these channels not being affected? That's because I actually omitted them from being affected, because you don't want to mess with permissions for your private channels. Those should remain unaffected, and it makes sense to leave them alone because most of the time your bots are not going to be in those channels. If they are, then you don't want to modify the permissions for them, especially if you're getting raided. And it's very important that you have a lockdown command for your server, especially if it's like a large server. Otherwise, something like this is going to happen. You want to make sure you have this lockdown command, but you also need to take into consideration that this implementation will affect every single one of your channels unless you opt out of it. So notice how these channels are not being omitted, right? I can still type in them. If I give this guy the admin role, or if I give him at least a bot role, right, he should be able to type in those channels because it remains unaffected. Oh wait, give me one sec. Hold on, let me take away the role from this guy. Okay, so he won't be able to see the other channels, but he can't type in these channels. But if I give him the bot role, he'll be able to type in these channels. Okay, so these channels over here by default are my private channels that I have. I'm just using my my current server as a template for this one. I just use the server template, and I have these private channels set up. Okay, and I obviously don't want these channels to be affected because it's just going to cause lots of havoc. And if you allow these channels to have their permissions updated, people are going to end up seeing these channels, or they might be able to send messages to these channels. And of course, for the announcements, rules, role menu, welcome channel, you don't want anyone typing messages in them. Okay, so I want you guys to make sure that you keep this in consideration. Make sure that you understand that the permissions part is like 90% of this implementation. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and implement the lockdown command. All right, guys, so what we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead into our v12 Discord.js bot folder, and I'm going to go and implement the command in here. So we are following along with the command handler because it seems to be one of the most popular things that everyone uses. So, but even if you're not using command handler though, you can still follow along because literally the implementation is just going to be very simple. Okay, so we're going to create a command called lock.js, and we want to make sure it follows the same structure as our other commands. So you want to make sure it has these three properties: run, aliases, and description. So we're just going to go ahead and change this to locks down a channel, and we'll have an alias set to lockdown. Okay, so what we're going to do first is we want to make sure that we understand how the command is supposed to work. So let me show you the signature. So it's going to be the command prefix lock or lockdown, because lockdown is the alias. The role ID, this is important, okay? And then it's going to be either true, null, or no, I'm sorry, true or false or no, one of these three. So if you don't understand the difference, so basically true is going to lock down the channel. So it's going to set the permission to false. Okay, if you have it false, is going to unlock the channel. So that's going to set the permission to the check. And then null is just going to override the permission, or not override, but it's going to set it back to the middle. So I'm adding this case just because some people might want to leave in the middle just in case. So it's up to you on how you want to use this, but we're going to handle these three cases. Okay, so the way our command handler handles our arguments is it gets rid of the command name itself. So in the args parameter, we have our two arguments, the role ID as well as the flag of how we want to manage our channels. If we look at let's see, message.js, you can see right over here. What I'm doing here is I'm saying let args to parse, and this whole line is getting rid of the space and getting everything after the lock command name. So it's going to just give us the role ID, space, and then the flag part. And then we pass that in to lock.js. So I just want to explain this so you guys understand how it works. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to parse args. So if I just log args to the console, you guys should see what it is supposed to look like. So I'll just do that real quick. So args 1, 2, 3 true. It should say 1, 2, 3 true. I just want to make sure you guys understand that this is what the argument should look like. So we should at most have two arguments. So we're going to go and do if args.split. So we're going to split it by a space. .length. So we're going to check to see if the length of the array after we split the args parameter. If it's not equal to 2, we're going to go ahead and just send a message and say lock role ID, and then true, false, null. So that's the signature of the command. Okay. Otherwise, we're going to continue on. So from here, what we basically want to do is we want to get the ID of the role. So I'm going to destructure those values from the array and assign it into the variable role ID and the flag. Okay, so we're going to do args.split. So what this is going to do, it's going to split the array. Okay, the 0th position of our array is always going to be the role ID, and the first position of the array is going to be the flag. Okay, so then from here, we're going to verify our arguments. So we're just going to go ahead and check to make sure that role ID is actually a number. So we're going to do if not is nan, whoops, role ID. So this is just gonna, so is nan checks to see if an argument, or if an argument is a number, is not a number. If it's not a number, it's going to return true. Okay, but since this is going to return false because it is a number, we're going to negate it. So this pretty much just checks to see if role ID is a number. And then we want to make sure flag is either true, false, or null. So we're going to create a function up here called const validate flag. And we're just going to go ahead and check to see if f is equal to true, f is equal to false, or f is equal to null. And these all have to be strings because the way we parse our arguments, they're all going to end up being strings. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and say if it is a number and validate flag, we're going to pass in flag dot to lowercase. Okay, so if this statement, if this conditional statement is true, then we can continue. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say roll. I'm going to say flag equals. So these are right now strings. We want to make sure they're actual we want to make sure they're the actual correct data type. So true, we need to make sure it's the actual Boolean value. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, hey, look, if flag dot to lowercase is equal to true, we're going to use a ternary operator and we're going to say true, or then we're going to do flag dot to lowercase equals false. We're going to do false or null. So this is just a ternary operator. It's a nested ternary operator. So basically what we're doing is we're checking to see if flag dot to lowercase is equal to true. If it is, we're going to give the variable flag. We're going to reassign the variable flag a value of true, the actual Boolean value, not a string. If this is false, we're going to execute this part. And then we just check to see if the flag dot to lowercase is equal to false, the string literal false. If that's true, we're going to give it the Boolean value false. If it's not, then it has to be null. Okay? And yeah, let's go ahead and continue. So from here, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we want to go ahead and go through every single channel and update the permissions. But before we do that, let's go ahead and define a set called ignored. So we're going to say this is a new set, and it's going to basically take in an array of the array of the channel IDs that we want to ignore. So I'm going to go ahead and ignore these channels. We're going to copy the ID of all of them. Okay, so we have 8. Okay, so the idea is what we want to do is we want to loop through every single channel in the guild. So we're going to go ahead and first get the let's see, we're going to go ahead and do message.channel, and we're going to do update overwrite. I'm sorry. Actually, we're going to do message.guild.channels. And the first thing I want to do is I want to reference the cache, because channels in version 12. So just to let you guys know, this is all in version 12. So channels in version 12 is a manager. So to get the actual collection, we have to call cache. We're first going to filter out all the category channels, because category channels might sync. Most of your category channels might be syncing up with your other channels, and so you might have some issues with that. But if you're confident that there aren't any, maybe you can play around with it. Anyway, so we're going to first filter out all the category channels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const channels equal this equal filter. We're going to filter out all of the category channels. So we're going to pass in a predicate function, and we're going to go ahead and check to see if the channel's type is equal to category. So this is a good way to check to see what the type of the channel is. Okay, so basically we're filtering out all of the category channels. Okay, actually, wait a minute. Oh, we actually have to check if it's not equal to category, because .filter is going to return every single element that passes this check. Okay, so before we were checking to see if it was equal to category, so it was going to give us the category channel. But we want to check if it's not a category channel, then we want to add that element to this channels collection. Okay, so this is going to give us all of the text channels. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and iterate through it. So we're going to use for each. We're just going to do channel. And from here, what we want to do is we want to go through every single channel. We want to check to see if that channel's ID is inside the set. So we're going to do if ignored has channel.id. We're just going to go ahead and skip. Actually, I'm just going to do if it doesn't have it. So if it doesn't have it, we're going to go ahead and skip it. But I'm going to also do this. Skipping, so I can get some logs. Skipping channel.name. Whoops. And then channel.id. Okay. Okay, cool. So before I even do anything else, let's actually test this out real quick. So this should work just fine. Let's go ahead and actually test that out. So, all right, let's see. So this shouldn't do anything, but if I go ahead and if I pass this in, see how it says skipping all these channels? So that's good. We're skipping mod logs, deleted logs, mod channel, admin, welcome, announcements, rules and info, role menu. That's great. Awesome. Okay. Now we actually have to update the overwrite of the channel. So there's a couple of differences. If you actually look at the documentation for Guild channel, there are a couple methods that allow you to modify permissions. So I want to kind of explain the difference. if you do overwrite permissions, that's going to override everything. Okay, so let's say for example for this welcome channel over here, I have a hold on, let me actually go into general. I have a total of, I guess, 6 overwrites. If I use the overwrite permissions method to overwrite the channel permissions for this, it's going to replace all of this with the new overwrites that you specified. Okay, so and sometimes you don't want to do that, so you want to be careful. In our case, we are only updating an overwrite, so we're only updating the permission of one role, okay, at a time. So we're going to use the update overwrite method, and we're going to go ahead and just follow the same signature. The documentation is amazing, so we can do channel.update overwrite, and this takes in a user or role. Okay, so you can either pass in a role object, the role ID, or user object or user ID. Okay, either one of the 4. But we want to pass in a role because we're updating the overwrite for a role, not a user, a role. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do role ID. Okay, and actually, we should actually check to make sure that the role ID, the role actually exists. So what we'll do is we'll do let's see, const role equals message. So if you want to check to see if a role exists, first we have to get the role. So we're gonna do message, or wait a minute. Actually, we can just do this. If message dot guild dot roles dot cache has role ID. So we're checking to see if the collection, the cache that is on the role manager, the guild role manager, we're checking to see if it has the role by its ID, because the cache maps all of the roles by its ID to the role object. So if it has it, then we're good. If it doesn't, we're just going to send the message invalid role. So let's try this case out real quick. So if we do lock 123 true, invalid role, perfect. So now we're checking to make sure the role actually exists. That's good. Okay. Now, I'm kind of going a little bit backwards, so I apologize, but we made that check. That's good. Okay, so now we're going to go. So now when we're inside this case, we know 100% that this role actually exists. Okay. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are updating the correct roles. We want to update the correct permissions, sorry. So all we want to do is we want to enable or disable send messages, and that's going to be based on the args right over here. Okay, oh, I'm sorry, not args, flag. So remember, flag is either true, false, or null. And if you look at documentation, for the permissions, you can either pass in true, null, or false. So we're going to pass in an object, pass in send messages, and we're just gonna pass in flag. Okay, actually, if we're locking the channel, send messages. So when we're locking the channel, the flag is gonna be true. So send messages, we need to actually make sure this is false. So we're gonna do negation operator. So if this is true, which means we are locking the channel, we're gonna do not true, which means false. So that means that send messages permission is false. Okay. Okay. So now this will update the overwrite for the channel, but now we want to make sure that we are editing the channel name. So we get this lock over here. You don't have to do this. This is just really for looks, but you don't really have to do it. But before I do that though, I'm just going to go and say we're going to call .then, and we're going to do let's see, .then, and we're going to go and do console log updated g.name. So that's the channel, that's the guild channel that was updated, and we're gonna just log the ID. And I'm gonna catch errors just to make sure, because one thing that I should mention is that some errors will be thrown if your bot does not have permission to actually see the channel or manage permissions. It's gonna throw an error. So I just wanted to point that out real quick. Okay, so let's try this out now. This should work. So right now our channels are not locked, or let me see. I think they are actually. Let me double check. send messages, I'm not sure. Give me one sec. I'm not sure why. These are suggestions. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. So right now, our other account. Let me just get rid of the bot role. So we can't send messages right now. So let's go ahead and try to unlock the permissions. So we're gonna do lock, and we're gonna unlock the channel. So in just a sec, this should lock. Yep, it updated all of the channels just like that. Okay, it obviously didn't, change the lock icon, but we're gonna do that later. So I'm gonna set this back to true. So that's gonna lock the channel. So now you can see that we can't send messages. And notice how these channels over here remain unaffected, right? These permissions were already there already. If we want, we can look over in announcements. We can see that these permissions are never affected. And we were modifying developer, not everyone. So you can see that if these channels weren't ignored, if they weren't ignored, then the developer rule would have been added to the permissions. So that's something important to understand. Okay, you don't want to modify these channels. But of course, you can opt out to it. But like I said, I'm pretty sure there are a bunch of different implementations out there. So this is just one implementation that I want to show you guys. Okay, so now the fun part is updating the name just for fun. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and inside this .then, I'm going to go ahead and just keep the console log. And what I want to do is I want to do g.edit. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and do this. Actually, this edit depends on a couple of things. So if they want to lock the channel, then we need to add the lock icon. If they want to unlock the channel, then we're going to remove the lock icon. So we're going to do if, let's see, so if flag, so if true, that means they're trying to lock the channel. So we need to add the lock icon. So we're going to do g.edit. And we're going to go ahead and do name. And for this, what we're going to have to pass in is g.name. So that's the name of the channel. And we want to add the lock icon. So we're going to get the Unicode emoji by just doing / lock . And that's going to get you the Unicode. And we're going to go ahead and do g.name. And we're going to go ahead and just concatenate it with the lock icon. And that should do just fine. But actually, I'm going to do one more check. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't already end with the lock icon, just in case something goes wrong. So we're going to do if g.name ends with, and if it doesn't end with the lock icon, then we're going to go ahead and add this. Okay. Now, okay, so that's good. So if it already has the lock icon, maybe you kind of like mess up the command, it won't add the lock icon. Because obviously if we don't add this check, and if we accidentally lock the channels 2 times, right, it's going to add an extra padlock every single time. Now in the else case, so if we're trying to unlock the channels, we're going to go ahead and remove the padlock. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and use a regular expression. So we're going to do g.edit. We're going to do name, g.name.replace. We're going to pass in a regular expression. So we're going to do / s for white space, or I'm sorry, s for slash. So it's / s, which stands for match up to a certain amount of white spaces. In this case, we're going to use the asterisk. And we want to make sure we match up to the lock. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and replace any space with the lock with just an empty string. So right there. Okay. So this is basically going to search for a pattern that has a space with a lock. Okay. And if it finds it, it's going to replace it with this empty string over here. Okay. And I think that should be just fine. Okay, cool. So, and of course, if there are any issues, like let's say for example, if the bot doesn't have permissions to do anything, it's gonna catch it down here. Okay, and it might be normal for some of your for some errors to be thrown, because if it does throw an error, just double check your permissions. I know I had a couple errors and I went to like my permissions and I had to like fix the permissions because my bot didn't have like the managed channel permissions, and it didn't have the managed channel permission and the managed permissions. Okay, so I actually wrote out a couple notes. So you want to make sure that you skip category channels because you don't want to mess up the synchronization of the permissions. You want to make sure the bot has managed channel and managed permissions. Okay, and that should be pretty much it. Okay, so the managed channel permission is for editing the channel name, and the managed permission is for actually updating the permission of each channel. Okay, so let's first try and unlock the channel. So notice how it gets rid of all of the padlocks. Now we have an issue right over here. Oh, I don't know what happened. Okay, so we can read messages, but for some reason developer is still... Hold on, let me do this again. Developer. Okay, lock false. So that should unlock everything. Okay, so we can send messages now. I don't know what I just did. Where did I send that message? I think I sent it in there. Okay, I think I updated everyone permissions. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I updated the everyone permissions. Okay, you can see it here. Yep, I'm pretty sure I updated everyone. Okay, and obviously we had the developer role and that was disabled, so we had to enable it for developers. So if I go ahead and if I want to disable it for developers, we're gonna do true. So that's gonna lock every channel. Okay. And that should do it. So like I said earlier, it really depends on how you have permissions set up. But generally what I recommend is to avoid, a bunch of confusion. If you have like a guild that has the at everyone role disabled for send messages, right, by default, because some guilds do that, then just worry about the developer role. Okay, so notice how I only have to unlock the channel, and I can send messages now, and the other channels remain unaffected, right? Remember, notice how when I unlock the channel, these channels remain unaffected. Okay, now, like I said, if I were to use the everyone rule, and if I were to lock, okay, so it is locked, but it's locked for everyone. I can still send messages because, let's say we're in Discord Pi, I can still send messages because for the developer role, we have the send messages permission overriding at everyone. Okay, so make sure you understand this. So you have to play around with your permissions. Okay, but just to be safe, you can just lock the channels for both roles, and you can also lock the channel for moderators. So let's say, for example, if I have a moderator role, so let me just double check over here. So the moderator role overrides permissions for developer, obviously, and everyone. So right now, the developer can actually talk. So let me go ahead and just disable permissions for developer. So we're going to lock every single channel for developer role. Okay, good. So now let's say if I give this guy moderator, he should still be able to type. See? Because the moderator role can't type in this channel. And the reason why is because I'm pretty sure in language specific our permissions, we don't have permissions. Yep, right over here from moderator, the permissions here. Let me actually modify this real quick. We can see that the moderator permissions are what's going on? So for these channels, we actually have send messages enabled for moderator. Let me just double check. Okay, good. So for these channels, we have to have Okay, I think there's something wrong with my synchronization. Let me just fix this real quick, and I'll show you guys how I fix this. So let's just enable send messages for everything. It sucks that, let me just do this. Sync permissions. Okay. I'm not sure why this is messing up. This is actually kind of triggering me. Okay. Okay, yeah, I don't get why this channel... Which one is it? It's the A language specific channel. Send messages, okay, that's good. Okay. Oh, you know what? It might be, well, it has moderator role though, so why would that be an issue? Okay, there we go. Wait, never mind. I'm like bugging out. Okay, yeah, so that was good. This should be good, and this should be good. Okay, so yeah, this is gonna take a little bit of configuration, but just make sure you set up the permissions and make sure it works. And you can see right over here, and we just got to enable it for off topic as well. But once you have it set, it's not going to affect the moderator role unless you manually lock the channel for the moderator role. So let me actually synchronize the permissions here. So in Starboard, we should be able to type. Let me sync the permissions with this one. And let's go ahead and unlock it one more time and relock it again. Okay, so right now we're a mod. Okay, we can go in all these channels, should be fine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the mod now, and these channels are still unlocked because we just messed up with our permissions, but let's try this again. So we're going to go ahead and lock the permissions for developer. We're going to do lock true. So that should do a one-time command, so that should lock every single thing for us. Okay, like I said, we had to sync the permissions to fix the moderator role, but once you sync it and once you lock it again, it should be fine. And then we can unlock it for the developer role by doing this. Okay. Okay, and let me just double check here. We have everyone is disabled. Now, what if I actually set this to null? Okay. This isn't really going to really change much. It's just going to affect the role. The way it's going to affect the role is that it's just going to go ahead and set the permission to null. So let me see right there. Okay, anyways. But yeah, you guys get the idea. So, yeah, so this is a pretty cool implementation in my opinion. I just thought about it and it took me like about an hour or two to figure it out. But let me know what you guys think. Like, I'm sure there could be a better way to approach this, but I looked on YouTube and I didn't really see any tutorial on how to do a lockdown system, so I decided to come up with this. But I'm sure that there's probably a better way to approach this. If you guys have an idea, let me know and I'll try to implement it. And yeah. So I will see you guys in my next video. I'm going to leave the code in the description so you guys have a reference to it. If you guys need any help, feel free to join my Discord server. There's a lot of people that are in it right now. It's been active the past couple days. I will try my best to answer as many questions as I can whenever I see it. And if I don't, someone else that is willing to help will be able to help you guys out. So it's a great way to grow as a developer. It's great to learn. And yeah. So I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.